If you are participating in this learning event, it means that your organization is a member of the Millennium Water Alliance. MWA is a permanent global alliance of leading humanitarian research and business organizations that convenes a trusted network and serves as a hub for collective impact, accelerating learning, and influences priorities and funding to scale sustained water services and resilience globally. Globally, MWA and its members collectively serve over 50 million people in over 100 countries and are leading advocates for greater water and sanitation commitments by governments and the private sector. MWA's head office is co-located in Nairobi, Kenya, and Washington, D.C., with current program hub offices in Kenya and Ethiopia. A bit about our moderator today. His name is Alfred M. Ireri. He is currently a project manager at MWA member Catholic Relief Services in Kenya. He is passionate about effective development work and data utilization for learning, performance improvement, and decision making. Now I'll turn it over to you, Alfred.
Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining us. Welcome to today's webinar. This is a follow-up webinar on a learning exchange that we undertook sometimes back on localization. The purpose of this webinar is to provide us a platform to discuss further, understand, and also learn more about the aspect of localization in the WASH sector. And today we are privileged that we'll have presentation from from one of our colleague or partner, and then we'll have discussions from a group of panelists who I will introduce later. In a nutshell, so will be a great opportunity. So further, you'll have an opportunity to break out into groups where you'll discuss further and also get candid on some of the topics in relation to localization. So in that, I'll take this opportunity to welcome our first presenter. We'll welcome our first presenter, Ireri Janoch, who is the Senior Director, Thought Leadership and Learning and Knowledge Management from CARE US. So welcome, Ireri.
Hi, thanks so much, Alfred. So today I'm going to talk about a survey CARE did with our local partners, and I want to start by giving full credit to Don Wadlow and Nicole Tobin, whose names are on this slide. They did the survey and they originated this work. They're in charge of a work stream at CARE about how do we change our operations to meet our partnership goals. So full credit to them for having done the work that I'm going to be talking about today. So CARE has made a lot of commitments to partnerships at the high strategic level. So Vision 2030, which is our guiding document between now and 2030. We have partnership standards for CARE 2030. We've signed on to the Pledge for Change. And we're really talking about this idea of embracing partnership, reciprocity, mutuality, accountability that goes both directions. And we've made a lot of grand commitments to that. And we all know that sometimes it's easier to make big commitments than to change the actual details of the work. And that particularly focusing on operations. Is the way we're doing procurement, is the way we're paying our partners, is that reflecting these high-level visions that we have? So we're going through a process right now, we have a whole work stream about it, to think about how do we do that and what are the changes we should make. And what I'm going to be talking about today is this survey of 69 partners that we asked, what would you like us to do differently? So we gave them a list of potential things and we said, pick your top 5. And then we also gave them a space to say, if you have priorities that aren't on this list, please tell us. So what are the top 5 things partners asked CARE to do differently in the way we run our operations? Number 1, pay more and pay early. 77% of our partners said instead of creating funding gaps because we're in the process of reviewing a financial system or we're looking at a report or we've got some kind of a setup where payments come in one at a time, we could think about providing a longer run and asking for a report halfway through. So doing 2 tranches of funding at the beginning so that partners aren't left with a gap. Having to pre-finance or having a gap in financial reporting is incredibly stressful and hard for partners. A lot of partners don't have the flexibility to pick that up. So that's the number 1 priority that they asked us for. Second priority that they asked us for was to focus more on support than on tiny errors. 64% of partners said this. And again, it's related to that idea of making sure that they have the money and they're not left with a funding gap over small details in a financial report. That doesn't mean that we tolerate fraud. That doesn't mean that we say partners can do anything and we will just put money in with no accountability. But that there's a difference between a small error or a technical problem in a report and fraud. And so how do we think more about focusing on supporting and correcting when there are errors than always treating it like a compliance issue? The next one is about signing simpler agreements. So CARE has very long, complicated partnership agreements, MOUs with lots of requirements, many, many pages. Depending on what language they're in, that can be a challenge. How can we be more simplified, particularly when we're talking about local partners and when we're talking about smaller grants? How do we have simpler agreements? How do we make it easier to sign those agreements and so that they make more intuitive sense without having to have many American lawyers look at them for you? Next one is about being more flexible and let partners make their own decisions. So instead of having every line item that CARE approves and CARE makes choices over, how can we provide more flexible grants? How do we provide grants where the partner decides, here's what we're going to spend money on, here's how we're going to think about the different pieces. Maybe they could use it for overhead, maybe they could use it for learning, things that might not be built into a traditional, line by line project implementation budget. So how can we allow for that flexibility and let them make more of their own decisions? Again, that doesn't mean that we can't have any controls and that there's no agreements we would make with partners about where money can and cannot go, particularly in line with the donor requirements that we face. But there are ways to think about this problem more flexibly and to leave more control in the hands of the local partners. And then how do we think about being a partner instead of a donor? So instead of behaving like we are the donor and we make all of the choices, how do we work where it's more of a mutual partnership? It's equal and it's reciprocal. And one of the suggestions that I find fascinating is how do we train our staff to behave that way? So it's not just the idea that CARE, organizationally speaking, should think about partnership as mutual, but that the devil's in the details. It comes down to the interactions between staff at different organizations. And how do we support our staff to think more about this like equality and less like a compliance function? So there's something really interesting in there about our own behaviors and how we think about that relationship differently. One of the things I find most fascinating about this survey is the idea that you see the bar chart here. In orange is what CARE staff answered when we got this survey. So in blue is what the partner answered, or the partners answered. But we also did a survey with the CARE staff and the exact same survey. And you can see here, we would have been wrong. If we had done what the CARE staff prioritized, we would not be doing what the partners prioritized. So that idea of sending 2 tranches up front, partners prioritized that very highly. It didn't make it into CARE's top 5. So how do we think about that differently? It just shows the importance of bringing humility to this work and of creating spaces to listen and really think about what is it that partners need versus what it is that we assume they need. So how do we create space for that? It's also important, part of the reason we're making this public and we're talking about it is this idea that we need to be accountable to these things. And also, I don't think any partner wants now to have to fill out a survey like this for everyone they ever work with. And they certainly don't want to have to do that every month or every quarter. So how do we share data in such a way that we can learn from each other instead of putting a huge reporting burden or survey burden on local partners who already have many things to do? So that idea of not creating survey fatigue, how do we share this kind of data more equally, which is part of why we've made it public. So what else did we hear? I said we gave some space to say, if your top 5 aren't on here, what else do you want us to know? So pay faster, that's the same idea, right? That there is not a lot of space for partners to pre-finance, and they don't handle funding gaps well. That's really hard for them to deal with. So how do we make sure that we're getting money out on time? How do we offer more trust? So how do we think about treating an organization like we trust them and not like we don't trust them? So having really heavy procurement processes, incredible micromanagement, low approval ceilings for grants, all of that erodes trust between the organizations. So how do we create space for that? Also, can we be clearer about what happens with exchange rates? And this came up from many partners and was kind of a surprise to CARE. Partners know that CARE usually gets our budgets in US dollars or euros or some other international currency. And then local partners get their budget in local currency. And there's an exchange rate there. So that fluctuates how much is available in local currency. Partners wanted better explanations and more joint decision-making about what happens in either direction, either if the exchange rate could mean that budgets go up or if it means that budgets have to go down. And then how do we reduce reporting barriers? How do we make it simpler, fewer reports, simpler reports, depending on context, maybe no reports, to give partners more time to deliver the work and to feel more trusted rather than feeling like there is this heavy focus on documentation, compliance, and paperwork. So where to next? Where are we going from here? The first one is about putting words into action. So how do we take at least 2 of the systems and processes that are highlighted in this report, and by the end of FY23, which is the end of our calendar, or the end of our fiscal year, so that's the end of June for CARE, how do we start to make significant progress towards at least some of these? How do we build our risk tolerance? So one of the things we need to think about is all of these behaviors, many of these behaviors stem from a need or desire to control risk. And how do we make sure that staff feel confident that when there is a risk taken, we're sharing that risk and it's not them by themselves who's bearing the burden? And that there's an organizational priority to share risk with partners and not to push all of the risk to partners. We also think about managing risk more effectively. So there are different levels of risk. $1 million grant is not the same as a $10,000 grant. How do we think about creating different tools and more flexibility so that we're handling risk at the right level instead of treating everything like it's the most extreme version? How do we advocate for broader change? This isn't just about us, and it's not just about what CARE does. We generally say, well, this is how it is. This is what the donor wants. How do we think about pushing back? And how do we use evidence like this to push back on the system so that we together can shift it? That's not something we will do by ourselves, but we have space to advocate more. We need to keep consulting with partners. And I said before, the last thing we want is to create survey fatigue and just send out a survey, every 6 months just to see how things are, especially if we're not acting on it. But how do we make sure that we have inclusive consultation with partners? So to take just the example of this survey was done in French, Spanish, and in English, and it was done online. That leaves out some people. So how do we think about continuing to build that space for consultation and continuing to create spaces where we are listening for what partners are asking for? And how do we hold ourselves accountable? Part of the reason for making this public is so we will be accountable, so we can come back and say, here's what we're learning, here's what we've done. This worked, maybe it didn't work. What do we know about that and why did it happen? So those are some of the big important pieces for us. And then this last slide is just about links to partnership materials and where you can find more of the content here. So we will share this with the group after the call.
Thank you, Emily. That was quite impactful and quite resourceful. And I think one thing that came out very significant is the aspect of us that we are more of partners than donors, and also the aspect of also advocating for a broader change with donors, which is quite a good linkage towards the localization approach, where we are able to have a flow from the top to the bottom or from the bottom to up. Thank you for that. And I think for our participants, those who wish to have more questions, the Q&A section is open. You can put your question there and we'll respond to it. So from this point, we'll head up to our panel we'll be discussing on aspects of localization. And today we are privileged to be joined by 6 panelists who will be part of the discussion. One of the panelists is Ahmed Ibrahim, with the Chief Executive Officer, Allied Grants Development Focus. That's an organization based in Kenya and will also be participating in this discussion. We have Beata Akanyani, who is a program director, Afram Brains Development Organization based in Ghana, and we also have Wilson Kabaganba, director, the deputy chief of party, USAID EGIR, currently working for Africa Evangelism Enterprise Rwanda. We also have Sophie Morin, who is the director of institutional strengthening at Cantaro Azul in Mexico. We also have Mudhi. Mudhi is the team lead and founder of BasePro in Malawi. We also have Godman Oloya, the program director, Water Access Consulting, Ghana. This will be our panelist for today, and we'll be discussing on certain questions or certain guides. So thank you for joining us, team. And I think I would pose my first question to the team. And what I would like to hear from you is in regards to what you understand or how we can define the term local or localized in organization. What do you think about it, Mr. Ahmed?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be able to be part of the panelists. And going straight to your question, localized means locally registered, have local contexts at the back of their hand. They are at the forefront, as close as possible to the communities. Even government itself is local. So localized people who normally are faced with the problems, actors who are at the forefront, and who have a certain level of mandate also to be able to be at that forefront. So localized means you'll take immediate action. You understand that context. You know what partnerships work, how to work with the local cultures and traditions, as well as being able to really know what are the barriers, the blockers, and these things that happen at the very, very village level. And it still could be at subnational level where some of the countries are working, or at national level. So it's just within that geographical jurisdiction that I can really say is local and localized. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for the great input on saying about the local registration, looking at legal compliance within the specific country where you are implementing, which is quite wonderful. I think for the next question, I would allow the team also to raise their hand if they feel the one wants to also add in or want to take up the response. And oh, Modi, you have your hands up. Okay, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Alfred, for recognizing me, and thank you everyone for joining. I want to make two very quick comments. I think the first to the presentation, particularly looking at what CARE did, which was a welcome development, which is trying to listen to their local partners. I've had the privilege of working for both international and local organizations, so some of the frustration that international organizations experience from local organizations, I understand. In some way, it's justified. So I think maybe I would put this to the presenter to probably consider this, because I think a lot of the over focus on compliance, the tiny errors I think you referred to, they didn't just come from nowhere. They're in some cases, having myself supervise local partners, sometimes the local partners inflicted on themselves. And this is not a criticism, this is just an objective observation. And this goes to the point I think you sort of mentioned, but didn't go in depth into, which is the issues of fraud, things like fake receipts and things like that. This is an actual serious problem. So sometimes the sort of over focus on compliance is self-inflicted. So as much as the international organization is being asked to be more considerate and collaborative in the way it does things, I think it would be interesting to do the opposite study, where it's not just the local partner sort of doing a survey for CARE, but it would be interesting to look at certain areas that CARE is concerned about and see what partners themselves think. So trying to do the same exercise, but flip it around to sort of see what comes out of that. I want to agree to something Ahmed said, and which is localization, which is essentially strengthening local institutions, local systems, local actors, local parties. Now, the thing that I find, I run a local organization in Malawi. Now, there seems to be this monopoly on this idea of localization, that it's purely an NGO thing. For me, if an international organization works with the local government, strengthening the local system, that is localization. But in my context, localization is seen as uniquely a civil society issue, when actually you can work with a local government department to actually solve a particular problem. That is localization. So it's not uniquely a civil society issue. It's an issue of trying to understand what is the most effective way of delivering sustainable development or sustainable change. And if that is a local government department, that's localization. So localization to me is any local entity or local actor that would enable the sustainable change that we're looking for. That would be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Wonderful input. Then I'll progress to another question. How can multilateral and international organizations work in collaboration with local WASH organizations, putting the interest of the local beneficiaries at the center and not donor driven? And in this, we are looking at aspect of, do we just work casually with donors, or do we do what donors want, or how can we also be working with them to ensure that we're able to achieve what is needed at the local level? Thank you. Sophie, do you wish to take up this? Thank you. Over to you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and to learn with other people, other organizations in the world, and to, I don't know if I'm representing, but Mexico and Latin America, no, in this discussion, no. Yes, I think that to ask to contest the question is the context. Sorry. I will. Yes. So to work with our organization, or to do what the donors want, I think it's a question of understanding the context, no, of the regions where we are working, the local organization, and to go further the official indicators, no, of the WASH problematics. For instance, in Mexico, the official indicators show a reality that is very, very different from the reality in different regions in Mexico, no? So it makes invisible different realities, mainly in rural areas that don't have access to the more basic services, no, in WASH services. And for one part, it's because of those indicators, or were mainly, or doesn't exist, no, or they exist but they are wrong with their definition, or they are underrated, no, or they exist but they are not shared with the public institution. For instance, in our organization in Mexico, we ask the government to share the data, the water quality data in schools. The government had but didn't share, no, and we had to make a whole process to obtain those data and to publish them in order to provoke the government to make change in this area, no. So I think that to understand the context is to go further the official information, is to also to entail discussions and conversations with the local partners, and to enable them or us to not only with money but also with time, no, in order to develop those participating processes, in order that the projects and the processes can come from the communities itself, no. And I think that the exercise that Emily shared us, I think the local organization, we have to make it too with our own beneficiaries, no. So it's not, I think the problem of localization, sometimes it's not like my colleague said, it's not only an NGO's problems, or it is not only a problem between donors and local NGOs, but it can also be a problem between local NGOs and what we call beneficiaries, no? So I think that's ourselves, we have to make our own processes too, to consider the people, the communities, the leaders that we are working with, not as beneficiaries, but as partners too, no? So I think it's a discussion at different levels, and for that we need time, or we need more flexible times in order to let the processes going on, and to enable to make participative construction of the project and of the processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Goldman has an addition. Goldman, over to you. Wow. Yes. Goldman, you are muted. As he unmutes, I think we can have Beata. Can you add?
Okay. So thank you. Good afternoon from Ghana. So I think one key thing that how multinational organizations can work with local organizations to put the interests of the poor or the beneficiary communities is for us to stop projectizing social development. Most of our work is about social development, water, sanitation, and hygiene. And there are timelines to this effect. Then mostly when the intervention is over, it just goes off. Then the issue of the benefits, the impacts are lost at a point. So for us to put the interests of the communities at the forefront, we need to stop projectizing most of the activities we are doing. Though there's a timeline, we should put measures. How do we do that? We need to build the capacities of the local individuals, the communities we are working with. We need to build their capacities. So in the design of everything that we are doing, the capacity building of the community members is very key, so that the sustainability of the interventions and the outputs would be sustained at the end of the day. And the other thing too is when we are designing products, say wash products or wash technologies for these communities, because we are looking at how their interest will be, not our interest, because we are serving these communities. So we need to look at the designs. Are they acceptable within the local context? Are we designing these products to meet the needs of the people, or we want to meet the needs of the partner, the donor partner or the organization at the community level? So we together need to design this to look at the acceptability, the affordability, its availability, and how accessible it will be. Because at the end of the day, you are there, you are running, let's say, point of use water treatment products. You are trying to look at how water can be treated. Then a product is brought, for instance, from a foreign country to Ghana, for instance, to a rural community. And it is based at the cities. How accessible is this? Then at the end of the project, we want safe water. We want water to be clean and purified for us to drink. Are we looking at the market at the local level to design these? So whatever we are doing for wash needs, we need to look at the priority. Well, priority should be the community members. So capacity building is very, very important at the local level. We are bringing systems, let's say water systems for communities. We are operating limited water systems for the communities. How do we ensure the operation and maintenance? Are we bringing a foreign person or the NGO or the private individual is maintaining for profits? But then minor repairs should be considered. So all these has to do with both hardware and software. We need to prioritize and put the community at the center stage in our planning. Whether with the report, we already know what the first presenter talked about. But then I think we need to put the interests of the community first before our interest, because we are bridging a gap at a point. I'll pause for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Godman, have you been able to unmute, or we can go to? Wow, this is eliciting a lot of discussion. Mostly, I think over to you.
Well, I didn't want to take anything from Godman. He seems he's unmuted, but I don't think we can hear him. Okay, yeah. Then I'll just go ahead. I think for me, the question has always been who sets the priorities, right? And I think there's a general, and again, I'll speak from my context. I know it's different for different people around the world. In my context, I think donors and international organizations have the power. So you find that government may have the mandate to set the priorities, but they do not have the power. But NGOs do not, international organizations and sorry, I want to get this right. Donors and international organizations don't have the mandate to set the priorities, but they have the power. And in my context, the Ministry of Water has the mandate, but it does not have the power. And when we talk power, it's money. I mean, essentially, that's what it is. And you find that in my context, you find that we have had, if you look for any study that's been done on the political economy of my country when it comes to water and sanitation, the major gap is government leadership. It's not that there isn't a ministry. It's not that there isn't a minister. All the required pieces are there. Yes, there are issues with understaffing and financing, but the entity is there. But because there's this issue of where the power lies, whoever has the power, and this means money, sets the agenda. So you find that there are all sorts of grouping, particularly when it comes to setting the agenda, when it comes to sustainability, when talking to government. International organizations, they sort of form a little club and operate on their own. And they isolate local organizations and they set the agenda with government. And because government doesn't have the money, they listen to international organizations and donors. So in a way, as in the case of my country, we have put ourselves in this situation because my government doesn't take leadership. So NGOs, international organizations and donors set the agenda. And like, for example, the work that I do at a local level, I realize it has no impact because I can set the sustainable systems, but if the international organization at the top is influencing government to think otherwise, that conflicts with what I'm doing on the ground, I'm not achieving anything. So I am finding that I'm doing a lot of my work is spent in meetings challenging certain ways of doing things. I find myself in meetings where I'm trying to say, no, what you're suggesting is not right. That you're only causing more problems further downstream in the community. So a lot of the priorities are set by international organizations and donors. And the reason for that is because government is not setting the agenda or not taking the leadership to set the agenda. So it's kind of a catch-22. So local organizations like mine have to operate in those spaces, influencing the way things should be done. So that's my point.
Thank you. I see I think this will be the final responses from the two from Ahmed, and then we'll go to Wilson, and then we can progress to the next discussion. So Ahmed, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, I will start off with the aspect of institutional systems strengthening. And most of the time, as we work on these different things, then we forget that there should be a standard ways of doing things. We should also be putting quite a lot of work in how preparedness work is happening. How can we put water as the nexus connector in between all the other key things, food security, education, nutrition, and every bit of it. We also need to really be thinking very well to ensure that we are reinforcing and not really replacing the institutional structures. And we must make sure that service delivery to the beneficiary is happening to the best and optimal way, and ensuring that governance and all these pieces are really working together. So as we really work on these key things, you'll see locally schemes, water schemes. So siloed, the management setups are not working very well. There's this one which is low yielding and therefore cannot meet the operational costs. Government needs to step up and do the subsidies. But if a water service provider model is really going to be put, then what is the clustering around it? Who really will be talking about the issue of tariffs? What is the role of the communities in these bits? So in a holistic way, we really need to be thinking around the integrated water resource management models. We look at the service delivery and what models are really working without undercutting what is the role and responsibility of the government, and also ensuring that we make sure these kind of things really work. There is the aspect of pro-poor, because from the place where I come from is dry lands. From the dry lands of northern Kenya, the poor are the ones who are paying for the water. The rich don't. So is that equitable? No. So these are things we really should be working together with the multilaterals and together with the international community. One other thing which I really will advocate for is to really have multi-village water systems so as to reduce some of these too many things. One other key thing that I have really seen is in a place like Kenya, Some of the regions are drylands. The ways of lives of people are pastoralist in nature. If you settle everybody and talking about water every other 5 kilometers, then you're undermining the livelihood systems of the people. So if there will be no space for mobility, no space for grazing, although we need to have water at as close as possible to everybody, then can we be able to have quality water and quantity water at strategic locations, which are going to be available at different times? And then we encourage and put water alongside rangeland management, natural resource management, and environmental issues. So these are places which we need to support the government and the people who are really in need of these water systems, up to the village and maybe ward levels, sub-county to a national or sub-national level. Thank you.
Wilson, over to you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm Wilson, as you said, and I'm happy that I joined this platform where I'll be sharing with colleagues. I'm coming from Rwanda, AA Rwanda. I want just to jump in and then talk about two things. One is about the yes, we need to put more emphasis on building the capacity of structures from different levels. Here I mean from the grassroots level up to the national level, because these structures are the ones that are going to be equalizing the power, if I can say, from my colleague who have just talked about this thing, equalizing power, where people can come and share and know what is needed in the community, and then try to make sure that this thing that is needed in the community, they are the ones, they own they own the process, they own everything. If I share with you our case in Rwanda, at each level from the district level, we have the JAF, Joint Action Development Forum, where all the partners, the international and local partners, they meet together, and they even meet on a monthly basis and even quarterly basis. They elect their leadership, they share their interventions, they even within that forum, they also have they have many members into that forum, where each partner, each organization, each community is represented into that forum. So from there, the community initiatives and community ideas are heard. And again, it's not like the international organizations are the one driving every change, but the forum is the one that is deciding what to be implemented and when it to be implemented and where it's supposed to be implemented. So having these structures and even capacitate them and even make them function and meet them together, I think this could equalize the power and make sure that whatever we want to do is delivered at the community level. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And for that, I'll progress to the next question. What is missing from the WASH and localization discussions? So it is open, or would we? Wilson, I think I can give you the opportunity to respond on this.
Yes, thank you so much, Alfred. I think, yes, there are person can talk about many things, but let me highlight a few. Yes, we are capacitating these local structures and agencies. We are giving them skills and knowledge to understand what is needed in the community. But I think the empowerment is one thing, but again, the capacity in terms of finance is another thing that that is needed at the local level. Here, I mean, take an example, the structure is strengthened and is given skills, but again, the structure needs to be facilitated to analyze the community issues and then come up with data, analyze the data, and even come up with relevant interventions to the community. So there is that need of financial support to these structures to make sure that whatever that has came from the community, whatever that has been raised, can be implemented at their communities, and even with that support. Briefly, that's what I can say.
Thank you. Sophie, would you add, or would you kindly add on that also?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting conversation. I would like to say also that what is missing, I already said that to go further, the official indicators, no? And also I think there is another barrier that can make invisible the different contexts in which we work. It's the languages barriers, no? So specifically in Latin America, there is a lot of literatures, of experiences, of methodologies that have been proved by local organization, by local universities, local research. But my colleague that work more in the, the research world and this kind of forum and so on, told me that there is not, the information doesn't, how can I say, it's not shared, no, between the Anglo-Saxon world and the Spanish-speaking world, no, to talk about what I know, no, but I think it's the case in many other languages, no. So there are a lot of, not only the context, not only the problematics, but also the experiences, the methodologies, and the monitoring and evaluation results that are not known by the grant donors or institution in the context. So it's another barrier that we identified. And another thing is to also know the local framework in terms of legal and tax framework of the social organization in the countries. No, for instance, in Mexico, the legal framework has changed, and it's becoming more and more difficult for a local NGO to operate because of the lot of reasons, and we have to. As my colleague said, build capacity in this area too. So we have to invest in our local, in our structures, in our governance processes, to fulfill all the requisites that the law. As the legal framework want us to do, and mainly we don't have the resources, we don't have the money to make this. No, also there are not. I think it's the same case in many countries. We have to juggle with a lot of financing sources, so that we can operate our programs. But we have very few, or we don't have financing to finance the operational basis. No, so I think it's a very common problem in local organization. So we have to juggle with all these finances to have a sustainable operation, and it will be more clear, more easy, more transparent to have special fundings for the operation basis of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes. Ahmed, I see your hand is up, and I also see a guest. We'll give them a time to also raise. There is also a lot that is coming on from the Q&A, so we'll also respond to those along the way. Thank you.
So what is missing from the localization is this focus on governance. Is one thing, the community managed water systems. What we are seeing is what is communal is mismanaged, and what is mine is working well. This mindset really needs to shift. And for it to really shift, then we need to really look at the most effective governance or water management setup. Do we need to have 13-member committees? Or maybe 3 will have been operational and good as long as there's an accountability, transparency, and we ensure that the systems can function, it's affordable, and the communities have a say more in how the tariffs are set. The second other one that I will really want to talk about is there is this mindset of saying that we are working with the government as local actors. However, it's just being used as a ticking the box. So what does that really mean? If you're working with the government, is it because you want to put funds into the budgeting system, allocation, and therefore can easily be tracked, or you just want to work with the technical department and therefore you do X, Y, Z, and therefore the INGO staff are really going to be doing the implementation directly. So from that perspective, then it has always been very not easy to track the 25% transfer of funds as directly as possible to local actors. So if we really want to go in the wash, and I've sat as in the strategic advisory group of in Somalia, in Kenya, and the SAGs, I really feel it's not easy to really push that agenda, and it will be really very critical if we really want to push localization discussion within the world. Finally, it's about the skills. If an INGO, let's say, is working in an unstable kind of context, does it have to go to the ground to set up an office? Or you can use an accompaniment method, sitting within the partners to be able to push and support the technical skills with a number of local partners that the INGO will be working with. So these will be the key critical issues which I see are really missing. And the final one is what is really being said about localization at headquarter level might not actually be actualizing within the INGO frameworks at ground level. So those are the key things that I will highlight. Thank you.
Thank you. So Beata, over to you.
All right, so thank you. And I really support the earlier discussions on what is missing. One other aspect I want to bring on board is the system strengthening of local NGOs. That particular aspect, sometimes the technical issues are achieved at the community level, the project results are achieved. But then what is left of the local NGOs? So the strengthening aspect of the local NGO for organizational management at times is not looked at the INGO side. So when you look at this, it has to do with capacity building. And for localization to be very effective and achieve its results, there's a need for capacity building on key topical areas in the wash sector. Emerging trends are coming up. And if the international NGO cannot get down to the ground where we are based, there's a need for this capacity building to meet that gap and to have issues aligned properly. There's a need for learning and mentoring and exchange programs for the staff. So we need that capacity to strengthen ourselves to meet the key issues that are always coming up. So because at times, merely the project ends, as I keep saying, the local organizations, okay, they have met their objective then. In Ghana, we just say like, bye-bye, you are gone. So, but there's a need for the strengthening of these local systems so that they are viable, they are available to ensure the issues are met at the local level. So this is the aspect I'm adding to the earlier presentations that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. Muthi, over to you.
I just want to concur with the previous two speakers, Sophie and Ahmed, particularly on this point of, I'll borrow what Ahmed said concerning working with government, that it's kind of a tick box exercise. I will speak from my own personal experience as a local organization working with other internationals. To be honest with you, it feels like having a local NGO as a partner is tokenism. We just need a black guy to be within a meeting. And I've been in those situations where I'm sitting in a meeting with my partner who happens to be white, and I'm not given a chance to speak. So you tend to wonder, like, then why am I here? Why am I being brought into this space? So you find that they just need a local NGO or a black guy to sit with them in a meeting. Actually, not. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now continue.
Okay, fine. Sorry, I was just getting a call. Yeah, so you find that I am not involved in any kind of decision making. I'm not involved in formulating strategy, using the local knowledge and understanding of the context of what actually works and what doesn't. That is my personal experience. So when Ahmed spoke about it in the context of government, it applies particularly with NGOs, as local NGOs as well, collaborating with internationals, whereby we're just seen as a token. And which kind of links with what Sophie said about building the capacity of local agents, because to me it seemed very clear there was no interest in trying to build my capacity. I mean, you see the attitude. The attitude is not for me to be independent. The attitude is not to build my capacity. The attitude is to keep me a slave. That is the attitude. And you know, you need to, internationals, please, you need to be very, very careful about the aesthetics here, because you are working in a continent that already has baggage of history. And then you're coming in and then you're taking me as an educated black man and you expect me to sit there and be quiet and just act as a token. That has been my experience. So sometimes working with local organizations, internationals work with locals purely for tokenism, just to say, we're working with the local organization. That's it. And I think you need to be very, very careful of the aesthetics of what that looks like. And yeah, I mean, sorry, this is something that I'm really particularly fiery about. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And a follow-up to that, because there was a question on the chat. How do we shift the power to the government and local organization? And what strategies do you think we can use? I think this was a question on the chat that I think needs to resonate with what you have talked about.
Is this shifting the power from internationals to locals?
Yeah, about the, you know, you have talked about the issue of that most internationals seem like they just want to tick the box. But I think you need to give us on your perspective on what we can do in terms of now shifting that to be like you as the partners and you as the government that you had said earlier. There is the aspect they don't have the money, but they have the ideas. How can we do now to shift that towards now we are able to inform the multilateral on what we need ourselves and how to address that?
That is a very difficult question, particularly when it comes to government, because if government is not taking leadership, who's going to do it? Like in the case of my work, what I'm doing a lot of is I do field work, but I find myself more in meetings where I advocate for government. So I was just recently at a meeting 2 weeks ago where NGOs were complaining about government, what was it? There was some complaint they had. I actually jumped in on behalf of government and said, we are not coordinating as organizations. We are the ones not coordinating. So if we're not coordinating, how can we expect government to do it for us? Somebody asked something in the chat about, can I give an example of a time when an international organization did something that was not good or conducive for sustainability? One of the things my organization does, we do water point mapping. Like my organization mapped my whole country in terms of rural water supply. So we mapped all the water points, I would say 90% of them across the country. Now, we went into a district, right? We went into a district and we said, we're going to map this district. It turned out an international organization was planning to do the same thing. So I said, great, come here, let's sit together, let's coordinate. I had meetings with this international organization. We shared our tools, we harmonized our tools, and it was just an issue of waiting for them to have discussions with their head office. And guess what? I waited 3-4 weeks, I got no reply. Next thing you know, they went at the mapping anyway, without telling me. And then the unfortunate thing is, because I was partnered with an international organization and they don't want to seem like they're being left out, they told me we're going to map as well. So basically, we went to the same district was mapped twice in the same year, and we worked with the same enumerators to do the same exercise. But the person who knew this was happening was the district water officer, the local government, and he said nothing. So how do you solve that? And I went to the national government and said, can you control us? Can you regulate us? Can you coordinate us? The government had nothing to say. If we're being frank here, the government had nothing to say. So what do I do in that situation when the internationals with the money will do whatever they want? Tell me. That's why I'm saying I don't have an answer for that question. Besides building capacity of government. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we'll go to our next question. On what question should MWA members ask themselves when partnering with your organization? And at this point, I would let Godman to have a response on this, then also the panelists will add on. Godman? Okay, I think he's still having some technical challenge with his microphone. So I think Ahmed, would you take this question, please? Okay, thank you. Beta, over to you.
So thank you so much. I think there are some key questions that MWA should ask when they are going to partner with, for instance, my organization. My organization is a Farm Plains Development Organization, and we work in 5 regions now in Ghana. And looking at the questions that MWA should ask, should look at what's our governance system? How is the organization governed? So you have to look at the managerial ability. That would make them know how we work. Then the second thing too is also look at, are we legally registered according to the Ghanaian laws? Because sometimes we have some organizations that are working and they are not legally recognized or they are not registered. So these things are important. I'm speaking with the Ghanaian context in mind. Then the other aspect too is to look at how do we work? What are the approaches that we employ to work at the community level? Are they complementing what the donor partner does? What approaches do we use? What are the lessons we have learned from previous projects? What are some of the key achievements that have been chalked over the period? So it's important to know the methodologies, the approaches. For instance, we use participatory learning methodology, bottom-up approach in almost everything we do. What are our relationship with the community members? What has people or the local government system, district assemblies, what's our partnership level with them? So these ones are very important for any donor partner or MWA is trying to work with APDO. And are we also affiliated to any CSO body? For instance, in Ghana, we have all local NGOs registered under Coalition of NGOs in Water and Sanitation, the CONIWAS. So are we a member of CONIWAS? How credible are we? And if we are a member of CONIWAS, do we go and move with what the country priorities for WASH are, or we are going differently from what is happening? So these are some questions that we should look out for. Definitely the previous knowledge of the area and achievement over the period will be part of the questions that MWA should be asking. What have been our track record? What are we known for? What are our strengths if it comes to WASH delivery? Which parts of the whole WASH spectrum are we strong in? And where can we work together? So these are some questions I feel MWA can ask themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Ahmed, over to you. Then I think after that, we'll have to break into group session. Then maybe we can resume later. Thank you. Over to you, Ahmed.
Yes, thank you very much. I thought the sessions were almost ending, but now I'm back. So the key thing is when we are really looking at these things and for partnerships, we really want to have impact at a longer term. So definitely you should be looking at issues of strategic partnerships. The other key thing that already my colleague has really talked about includes the aspect of scalability, the reach of the area that can be, for example, maybe like ALDEF that I'm CEO, when we realized local actors need to really create the amplified voice, work together in certain ways, we came up with a network now that covers a very huge kind of setup. And from that perspective, the platform is not registered, but it harmonizes ways of working. It harmonizes the way we work with the INGOs. It harmonizes how we really work on preparedness work within the key things. So from that kind of a perspective, then it will be very critical to really look at how best we can push these things together at scale. The other key thing that I really would like to ask the INGOs to really think through is when we are talking about capacity, if it's really strategic, then capacity strengthening really will be not project-based. So once you identify that kind of partnerships, then you should already have capacity strengthening mechanisms around it that are separate from the project-based models. The other key thing is to look at clear roles and responsibility within the key things, looking at the alignment of the mission, the vision and values of those organizations that you'll be working with. What are those core competencies the local actors will really bring to the table? And then define it in a way that you can really be able to. The other key thing that I really think will be a key important thing is this already an organization that can get a niche of influencing, lobbying and advocating government to be able to bring in the changes that are really required within the space of WASH, such that then we can meet the sustainable development goals. Because the way I'm saying, a water facility that was built in 30 years ago when I was a young man somewhere, still is the same format. It has not moved in terms of putting piped water into the household. It's still not enabling the woman to do this. So unless we are jointly be able to really focus in that long-term way of doing things, then these short-term ones are just ticking and will not really help. It's just delivering that project at that moment. So they should be strategic in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think from this session, we'll break into groups so that then we'll resume later and finalize the discussions. Welcome back. I think at this point, we'll let the group leaders to give us their feedback. And for those, we had 6 groups, breakout sessions from capacity building. We had one that was looking at local program implementation. We had another one that was looking on, that was discussing on MWA and local localization, donor, and then we had the 4th one, which was discussing on donor and INGOs and localization. The 5th group was discussing on government and localization, and then the final one was on private sector. So, June? Okay, thank you. So I think we can commence in that hierarchy. So I think I will welcome the presenter for the group on to give us feedback on capacity building.
Thank you. I'll quickly share my screen of what we covered. So this was facilitated by Elijah, and we had some interesting discussion about two questions around capacity building. How can local organizations support global WASH learning and capacity building? And what are the WASH capacity building needs of local organizations? So initial discussions around the first question about how can local organizations support global WASH learning and capacity building talked about the difficulties of actually getting ideas across and acknowledged by international actors, but perseverance was seen as really, really important. So a lot of the program design seemed to have an international level, but especially context seemed to be very, very important, local context to determine learning needs. Specific issues like collapsing latrine pit and unstable soils. Knowledge about that from local organizations allowed the need for learning and training to happen. But yes, and another strong example from Mexico about working with local international research organizations coming together. To begin with, local organizations felt that they were seen as beneficiaries rather than equal partners, but pushing really having to advocate hard that their ideas and their needs had equality, that they were able to validate their own methodologies and ideas. Other ideas became easier, I think, over time. So Safe Water in Schools, funded by UNICEF, where there seemed to be more of a local equalization of local government, local NGOs, and researchers being able to come together to analyze problems and come up with solutions. So yes, there seemed to be a big struggle for local voices to be heard, and persistence and stubbornness almost over longer periods allowed that to change. For the second question, priorities, the first layer of priorities around technical knowledge, so quite a wide range of quite specific skills technically were put out there and said, yes, these are important. But also ranges around institutional capacity building, so needs assessment, writing proposals, market-based approaches. Strongly monitoring and evaluation came through as being seen as important. And again, wider still, things like ideas around governance issues, communications, bigger systemic change and strategy identification. But there's an understanding and a need for recognizing that there's existing capacity there. And so yes, going back to this idea of needing learning needs assessment to underpin the understanding around what are the local capacities and then therefore what are the local needs. So quite a mixed range there, but I think one thing that came through was the need and the ability for local partners, local organizations to feel that they have weight in the conversation and really push their needs and their demands and their knowledge, and that seemed to be key throughout this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. We are supposed to have 5 minutes each, so the next reporter will give us within 5 minutes. Thank you. So next is ROCO program implementation. Ivana.
Here is actually Olivier. I was the note taker for the room number 2. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I think I'm going to share my screen as well. We had some nice conversation in the room. Can you see my screen right now? So the question was, what are the advantages of implementing grant-funded WASH projects through local organization? There was a lot of input. Thank you so much for the people who participated. So among the advantage we have been discussing about, of course, it's increasing sustainability of implementation. It's one of the advantages. There was some example given around this. It brings innovative ways of implementing and innovative technologies that local organization can apply. So it's in a way encouraging innovation. It was one of the points we've discussed as well. Of course, it is encouraging also skills developments. And also local organization can get some recognition and acknowledgements from this type of implementation. It's also helping, according to the feedback we got, helping to develop a network and to make it grow in an easier way, thanks to this partnership. And users also are able to set technologies they can afford. And it's also an advantage that it can allow planification of budgets, future fundings. Thanks to this kind of implementation, then what I understood is like it's helping local organization to implement not for a year, but like someone was saying, if it's a water network, if it's few hundred meters of the network, and then maybe we can plan a budget for the coming years to continue the network with more kilometers of pipings. That would be an example that is allowed thanks to implementation with local organization. And then the challenges are, we had a lot of challenges. I'm hoping that I could note all of them, but please forgive me if some are missing, and you can also intervene to complete this. But surprisingly, we can see in advantage and in the challenge the same issue of acknowledgement and recognition, because sometimes the visibility is going more for international organization where and local organizations have been doing most of the work, and they are not well visible at the end of the day on the reporting or in the documents. So this is a problem, a challenge. And also sometimes some assets can be deployed by the international organization, but for some reasons it cannot stay in hands of local organization, which is a problem as well. The reporting issue also is a concern, because most of the time some local organization, if I understood well, they want to raise some concern deeply into some reports, but there is no room for this because the frame of the report is not made for that, and they are more focused on finance maybe and not enough on local issue, if I understood well. And also some person from local organizations saying that it's difficult to document a memory of the actions because time is missing. When the implementation is ongoing, it seems that there is a lot more to say about how it was implemented, not only technical, not only if the budget was respected or not, but many more must go into some documentation, and they don't find enough time for this. And to finish, I will just mention this feedback about bureaucratic obligation that are linked with authorities' requirements. We had this example from Ghana. If you work in a district, you will have to link with the authority of this district. But if for some reason another district is concerned by the authorization, then you need to start the work again to get the authorization again. Yeah, that's it, except if some people want to add something. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Feedback. Next will be the group that was discussing on MWA and localization. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alfred. I don't know if you all can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. So I will be discussing about what we shared in our group, and I'll go through two questions that we had. And one of these was, how can the Millennium Water Alliance as a consortium support localization efforts in the water sector? And what we recognized was MWA as an alliance is structured in a very strategic way, where it convenes and influences governments, private sector, NGOs to accelerate global progress in water, sanitation, and hygiene. And as such, we need to be seen to be supporting the local partners. And one example of this is here in Kenya, we are implementing a project dubbed Rapid Plus. And the way Rapid Plus is structured and programmed is that we are working very closely with the local government to ensure that they are part and parcel of the process of ensuring the implementation of the project in the local community. So they are very key in terms of supporting us with the resource sharing, active collection of data, and also acceptance within the community. Secondly, one of the other ways we saw of how MWA can support with localization efforts is to support the addition of local partners to the alliance. As currently it is that most of the partners are international NGOs and private sector partners. So we are hoping that probably we could create categories and subcategories for local partners to join the alliance. For instance, here in Kenya, we could provide a platform that not only huge NGOs can join from the United States, but also have local partners be able to join and contribute to the alliance. Something else we discussed about was the advocacy. And as such, since MWA is an alliance of very many influencers within the WASH space, to be able to use this to advocate regulators and donors, to be able to be more inclusive, to support local partners, to be in this space of implementation within the community level. Because one thing we really appreciated is that local partners do a lot of work and contribute a lot towards sustainable WASH projects. But most of this work that they implement is not viewed in the global space. So what we hope is that MWA as an alliance, that it has a wider reach, is able to provide a platform where work done by local partners is able to be seen across the globe. One more thing we discussed about is MWA to provide an equal partnership opportunity for both INGOs and also local partners, to ensure that local partners also feel appreciated towards the implementation, towards the work they do, towards contributing to sustainable WASH development. The second question we talked about was how local NGOs can best contribute to the alliance. And part of what we discussed was that local partners should create an enabling environment for partnership. That is to ensure that this is a win-win situation where they feel respected, they feel that they are able to contribute as well into the partnership with international INGOs. Two is we appreciate that local partners are really in touch with the beneficiaries on the ground, and they have a lot of experience with the local system and their acceptance within the community. Therefore, local partners should be able to assist us to coordinate more with the local communities. Also, this will ensure that there's sustainability in the projects that we implement within the community. One key thing that we also discussed was the sustainability of the local WASH projects. And we realized that for WASH projects to be sustainable, we need to work in synergy, both with partners, both with governments and local partners, to ensure that all these projects are owned up by the community. So sustainability was a key in our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. We progress to the next group that was discussing on donor, INGOs, and localization.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Paola from Coast. We talk about you see my screen? Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, just wait. Break out this one. Okay, and now?
Oh.
Yes?
Almost, yes.
Yes? Okay, so we talk about the donors and NGO and localization. If something is missing, please complete me. All the question was answered with a lot of passion of the participants. I think that this question is so important for them. So the first question was, how can an INGO best support localization efforts in the WASH sector? So in resume, we talk about that it's important to build together the capacity. It's not just talk about capacity building, is working as a partner. So about the INGO, we talk that is better if local organization and INGO talk about the support and what they need and made the plan about this support. The other one, so how can donors best support localization efforts in the wash sector? We said that INGO and donors is better if focused in working together with local partners and analyze together what they can do with the local partners, and should be reduce the administrative burdens on local actors, and some percentage of some overhead in the proposal contribute better to develop of the local partners. And some of these is better if taking in account the local partners, just look at the risk of the local partners receive with this proposal and have a better overhead to support the local partners. How do they need to reconfigure their activities and approach to fund it? So I resume in 3 points. Start working together, talking about the funds, and be transparent with the funds. Give the same opportunity to present proposals to local partners and change the attitude in the same line. Somebody said something of culture sensitivity training for INGO and donors for the worker. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. That was quite resourceful. So our next group will be group 5 that was discussing on government and localization.
Certainly, thanks very much. My name is Aisha from COS, and I'm going to share some of the learnings from our group on government and localization facilitated by Salima. So our group had a great discussion, but I'll summarize it very quick with timing. But to set the context, we acknowledge that different countries have different methods of systems of decision making. And so some are at the national level, some are at the regional level. So we need to ensure that whatever we're discussing needs to fit within what is the current level of decision making. And so we used 2 examples to discuss these, the different levels. So we had a great example from Ethiopia with their 5-year One Wash strategy. This is a great example that's showing how there's a number of different stakeholders who work together, but then again, this is at the national level. This can be in comparison to, for example, Tanzania, where decision-making is more decentralized. And so whatever the method used needs to ensure that it's supporting the local initiatives. And so regardless of how the decision-making is used, we kind of came to the conclusion that the key is to balance the priorities among the different actors, and that coordination is key. To ensure that all the appropriate actors are involved in the discussion. Some of the areas that came up that could support this is having different forums for discussion, whether it's at the national or local level, where different actors can come together to problem solve and implement solutions. And that there also needs to be opportunities to pilot different structures so that they have the capacity to respond. Recognizing whatever the local need is in the community, that whenever the issue is raised, they can take that and then use that to fund relevant interventions. So a lot of great points, but I'll keep it short and sweet for this piece here. And then we have the notes to share for anyone who's interested in further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So our final group will be the group that was discussing on private sector. Over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry. All right, so I will keep this short. I know we're running short on time. So we were looking at the private sector and localization. And the 2 questions we were discussing were, what is the role of the private sector in localizing the wash sector, as well as what are the advantages and disadvantages of involving the private sector. So under the first question, some of the examples that were put forward is private sector companies can act as models. So for both management and governance, they can be used for outsourcing service provision to optimize effectiveness and efficiency, as well as considering the benefits of private and public sector partnerships. Technology implementation is also something to consider. Private sector companies are often the ones to pilot technologies in the wash sector, such as sanitation. They can also act as key players in the local market, spare parts provision, as well as acting as local capacity supporters. Then looking at some of the potential advantages and disadvantages of involving the private sector. So an advantage can be that they are providers to meet demands in the household service provision. So local private sector providers can bring momentum that the NGO sector may not be able to household service provision. They can also act as leaders in technology and advancement, and again, efficiency and effectiveness. Could consider finding vendors that could be linked to trainees locally, so supporting and providing maintenance services. Then another question under this one, so do we see all community levels being involved in the role of the private sector, and consider whether local economic levels may be left out of that? So it's recognized that the private sector can be dominant. There's definitely a risk of corruption. For example, business groups could collude to unfairly increase prices. So because of that, regulations on tariffs must be clear. Proper government setup is important. Clarity is needed, and consider using MOUs to mitigate this as well. There's an importance of checks and balances, so having the proper monitoring systems to make sure that the systems function well, even though they could still be used to abuse the opportunity. Establish mechanisms for monitoring support. All of this depends on how we set policies and procedures around operational checks and balances. So the government and private sector should be working hand in hand with clear policies and ensuring that the private sector is abiding by regulations. So the government should be there to both support and guide the private sector. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And at this point, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the team from the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology. They are really doing a great job in terms of investment in knowledge and investment on people. And I think they have taken us through a very good session in terms of these breakup groups and also for the presentation. Thank you, and we acknowledge the support that you have taken us through this in preparation for this webinar. So at this point, I would like to we are getting on to the Q&A. And before we finalize the Q&A, we commence the Q&A, I would request that we can finalize the 2 questions that were remaining from our discussions earlier. And our panelists, I believe they are still within. One of the questions that I would ask them is where they see the organization in the next 10 years for just 2 minutes. Wilson, can you respond to that? I'll give you each a minute to give us where you see yourself, your organization in 10 years to come.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alfred. Yes, need to be optimistic. We are seeing ourselves in the next 10 years where we can fundraise for the needs that are rising from the community. We need to see that our organization having that capacity to mobilize funds that can support the needs from the community. And again, we are also seeing ourselves in the next 10 years where our organization can be reaching the whole country of Rwanda. We are now covering few places, so we need to cover most of the places in the country and seeing that all the needs coming from the communities when it comes to WASH are being tackled. Briefly, that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you. Muthi, over to you. 1 minute.
Yeah, I think for me, in the next 10 years, I'm really focused on becoming financially sustainable, meaning that if there's any challenge if I run out of funders, I should be able to have my own reserves to actually do what I want. And that is something I've already started by shifting the organization to becoming a social enterprise as an alternative to just simply being non-profit, but to actually have a profit arm that generates revenue for me to do the things I would like to do and not be limited by the funding that I get. So that's where I see myself in 10 years, financially sustainable through a social enterprise arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you. Beata?
Okay, so thanks for the question. Where APDO finds ourselves, we see ourselves in the next 10 years, is to expand beyond where we are. We need to grow. We want to expand towards almost all the parts of Ghana, so that it will be a learning organization for the youth, interns, students, and young WASH professionals. We want to make WASH a particular career path for young people. So we like to groom them. Secondly, we would like to increase and sustain relationship with our development partners. We have grown over time and we want to sustain that relationship and go beyond that. And also through the expansion, we want to go beyond WASH delivery, just basic WASH delivery, water, sanitation, and hygiene, to connecting to climate change, agriculture, health, and other livelihoods. We're already into livelihoods, empowerment, linking to WASH development. So we see ourselves beyond that. And we want to be known as national organization, not a local organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Ahmed?
I see myself as an igniter and a catalyst of a movement of local actors that are able to sit on the demand side. When government is doing supply, we help communities and us to be able to really hold the government to account, be able to have championed active citizenship in the management of water services, governance, and financing of water systems that are really working for people. And specifically, the bias that I have is the drylands, and therefore really look at it where county governments are able to do their basic minor setups, where regional blocks are able to bring in the higher level investments in GOSH infrastructure across multiple ways, and conflict management and other aspects that are the resulting of this are really managed. So from that perspective, it is more of growing out of where we are and be able to mentor so many other CBOs and NGOs to be able to take that other different role and be able to be a different pioneer in a different space and a bigger brother. Thank you.
Welcome. Sophie?
Yes, thank you. We hope that in 10 years we will deepen our impact. The fulfillment the size of the human rights to water and sanitation in Mexico, and especially in rural areas. No? We hope to diversify and deepen our partnership and to obtain long-term financing to ensure follow-up of the work with the communities and the local partners or the local people we work. And maybe we will be in a more complex scenario because of climate change and social changes and political changes, but we hope to have the strength to go on to deepen our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Godman.
Yes, Alfred.
Welcome. I think
thank you.
We can respond to this question.
It has been a long struggle. First of all, thank you everyone, the panelists for missing me, and I tried so much to get up, but now we are on this point. Where are we seeing our organization, what access in the next 10 years? First of all, I would like to start by saying what access has survived the first 5 years of its existence. We made our anniversary in last year, September. So there's been a long, tedious, difficult journey, but we have made a lot of progress. We survived 2 critical catastrophes. One, COVID-19. And then when we are changing our status quo from the traditional local WASH organization to a social enterprise model, we faced another catastrophe like taxations. We were heavily taxed by our government to a level that we almost collapsed. But surviving that, I'm seeing us moving the same trend, in a very good trend. Recently, our partnership is growing, and of recent we have got into partnership with Center for Affordable Water and Technologies. So this is a good move, and we see through these directions we are going to progress very well, and the window for more opportunities for partnership with multilateral organizations and social organizations there with companies. So we project to grow not on sustainably to support on our program locally, and also with support from other partners as eco partners. That's where the future holds for water access consulting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think our last question was on what's the one thing you know you must change, but that has been the hardest to move over time, and why? Yeah, this one will be open.
Well, thank you. Alfred, let me come in after a long time. The most I think is donor dependency. Initially, the first 5 years, we have been depending on grants, and sometimes if grant is about to phase out, the project duration is phasing out, there's a lot of shift in the management decisions. Sometimes it will downsize. We see people better, and it has been so painful. So we have been thinking of how can we survive, how can we operate, even if we don't have grants. So our strategy was to migrate from the local NGO approach of work, right-based, trying to go to social enterprise-based, whereby we could do consultancy and other services that could make us survive and exist and still meet the needs of the community through our proceeds. So that has been our game changer. But later on, I had to we had to face a draft from the government, because they had to tax us from all this period whereby we were working like purely NGOs up to the current situation where we are. So it is difficult, but that's what we are supposed to go with. So long as that's why in my presentations I had to think not only international organization or multilateral organization working in local organization, but also the government needs to give an enabling policies, because I'm seeing someone Muti is planning to migrate to social enterprise. They may face it the same way we are. Basically, that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Unless there's anyone who wants to add on. Okay, thank you all. I think at this point we'll reflect on the questions and also the comments that came in, and we'll also allow some of us of the participants, you can raise your hand. We'll give you an opportunity maybe to ask a question or add any comment that you may have. So from the chat that were going on, very resourceful information that came, and I think one of the comments that came from Alex Mwaura was when thinking about localization, I resonate with the idea of us NGOs and local NGOs shifting focus from ourselves to the community. One way to do this is that we could take time to really understand the challenges they are facing, and I think that's quite important for us to look at. And what opportunities exist to improve access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene. And then we can determine which agencies are best placed to contribute to sustainable wash. And that was quite informative. Then there was one from Abisu, who how can we get ourselves in a balance of interest in it is good if donor and NGOs consider the communities and local government interests and as priorities. But if the community and government prioritize construction and otherwise other systems components are equally important for sustainable wash services, providing provision is in which NGOs and donors are mostly interested. And I think this he was talking about the balance of maybe the government being more focused on infrastructural development and NGOs also focusing on the interest of other activities in the wash, which needs to be quite important in terms of looking at how government are approaching their development and where their focus are, so that also NGOs and partners can focus on the other areas that are less focused on. Then there was also a comment by Emmanuel Orella on drawing from the ongoing discussion on capacity sustainability, on building sustainable capacities of local organizations or actors. Do we think donors and INGO should have long-term investment in institution strengthening beyond the project period? This would involve having flexible grants, financing and using other multi-approaches to make the localization dream true. And I think it's quite important, and this was also echoed during the discussions in terms of how to strengthen capacity of local implementers and local government beyond the project phase. And this would be really an important way to see how we can marry this for a longer term improvement. I think those were some of the notable ones that I saw. And also there was a comment on Ethiopia and how they are having a good coordination forum on WASH with government and all other stakeholders so that they can prioritize on WASH agenda, which was quite good, important for information from Chaka. Jason, I think this point, I take the privilege to welcome you for any additional input that you may have. Over to you.
No, I just want to thank you all for attending and for your very frank and open discussion that we were able to have. I really appreciate all our presenters and our panelists and their contributions, and I was very happy to hear from all of you. I also want to acknowledge Cost, who helped support bringing this presentation together and help with logistics. And many of you met them during the breakout groups since they were the facilitators. Thank you all again, and we will be sharing the recordings of this with those who registered. We'll be editing it to the panelists and presenters. I will also be sharing it with you before we publish it to make sure we're good with everything. So yeah, well, thank you all, and if anybody has any more questions, you're welcome to ask them. Raise your hand. Now would be the time. But if not, I'll let you all get back to your day.
Jason, there was also a question by Moody about asking how do we communicate after this, and I think to forward to progress with the discussions in case of any popping up question or any discussion that someone may want, and I think you can give also a response on that.
Yes, so we will be sharing the contact information from our presenters and panelists with those who registered, so they'll be able to contact them through there. I also want to mention that we'll be sending out a survey to all of the attendees and ask that you please answer it, and please answer it frankly, and this will help us improve our future present learning events and learning exchanges. This is a new application for us, a new process for us. So thank you for your help on helping us improve. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think as we close, before we end, I think I would allow, if you're in a position to switch on your camera, I think we wish each other goodbye, because it has been quite a lengthy discussion. We haven't seen each other, but you have been able to see the panelists. And I think this will be a great experience also to see the faces of all those who have been part of these discussions. Thank you. I think we can wave and say goodbye. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah. And there's Leanne right there. Leanne has been the one with cost who's been supporting us on this. So good meeting you all.
Okay.
All right. You all have a good day. End the meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.